In the misty foothills of Kentucky, near the small town of Clay Hollow, there was an orchard people whispered about, but never entered. Rows of apple trees stretched for acres, gnarled and ancient, yet not a single fruit had ripened there in over 30 years. Locals called it the Still Orchard. In summer, its leaves shimmered green like every other grove in the county, but when harvest time came, the apples stayed small and bitter, hard as stones, colorless as ghosts. Children threw pebbles from the dirt road, daring one another to step past the rotting fence. Adults just shook their heads and changed the subject. But in 1906, a young widow named Evelyn Hargrove moved into the old farmhouse on the edge of that very orchard. She had nothing left. Her husband had died in a mining accident. Her child had fallen ill, and her only inheritance was this lifeless patch of land. Yet Evelyn believed in second chances, even for cursed ground. The townsfolk pitied her. "You'd do better to plant turnips in a graveyard," one neighbor said. But Evelyn only smiled. Land is land. Maybe it just needs a little love. Each morning she carried buckets from the well, watering the dusty roots. She hummed lullabies as she worked, songs her husband used to sing when they dreamt of owning their own farm. The orchard seemed to listen. The wind that once howled through dry branches now whispered softly around her shoulders. Still, the fruit wouldn't grow. Each bud turned pale and shriveled by midsummer. Evelyn's hands grew cracked and raw, but she refused to give up. At night, she'd light a candle in the window and talk aloud to her late husband, Thomas. "Maybe the soil's just tired," she'd say, "but I'll keep trying. You'd have done the same." And sometimes, when the moonlight fell just right, she swore she heard footsteps between the trees. One evening, as Evelyn tended the far row, she spotted movement near the fence, a small figure watching her. It was a boy of about 12, barefoot and ragged, his eyes wide as the harvest moon. "Ma'am," he called softly, "you ain't supposed to be here. Folks say the orchard's haunted." Evelyn smiled gently. "Then maybe it just needs someone to listen to its ghosts." The boy introduced himself as Caleb Dunn, son of a nearby farmer. He'd lost his mother years ago, and his father was too busy drinking to notice much of anything. Caleb often wandered the hills to escape the shouting. Evelyn offered him a biscuit, and soon he became her little helper, hauling water, pruning branches, even painting the fence. He'd laugh and say, "We'll make these trees proud again, Miss Evelyn." But sometimes, as the sun dipped low, Caleb would fall silent, staring into the orchard with fear in his eyes. "Something walks there at night," he whispered. "Something that don't like change." Evelyn didn't believe in ghosts, but one sleepless night she decided to see for herself. She stepped into the orchard carrying a lantern. The air was still as glass. Crickets had gone silent. Even the leaves refused to rustle. Then she heard it. A faint whisper, like breath through hollow wood. "Leave it. Leave it be." Her light flickered. Shadows shifted. For a moment, she saw what looked like a man's outline between the trees, tall, bent, with something glinting in his hand. But when she blinked, it was gone. The next morning, Evelyn told Caleb. His face went pale. "My pa says the orchard used to belong to the Mortons," he said. "They disappeared one night. Folks found the house empty, supper still on the table. Some say they're buried under the trees." Evelyn shivered but shook her head. "Even if they are, Caleb, souls don't want to be feared. Maybe they just want to be remembered." Later that week, while digging near the base of an apple tree, Evelyn's shovel hit something solid. She brushed away the soil and uncovered an old gravestone, small, worn smooth, and nameless. Caleb watched, wide-eyed. "Maybe that's why the fruit won't grow," he said. "The ground's angry." Evelyn knelt, touching the cool stone. "Or maybe it's just lonely," she murmured. That night she placed wildflowers at the spot and whispered a prayer. The next morning, something strange happened. The air smelled sweeter. A soft light fell over the orchard, and for the first time, one apple turned a faint shade of red. Caleb ran to her shouting, "Miss Evelyn, look, it's happening." She smiled through tears. Maybe kindness wakes the earth, same as it wakes people. But deep below, where roots tangled through forgotten bones, something else had begun to stir. A storm rolled in, 2 nights later, fierce and sudden. Lightning flashed across the foothills, striking the orchard's tallest tree. Flames spread fast, licking through the dry wood. Evelyn and Caleb ran into the downpour, trying to douse the fire with buckets. The rain finally smothered it, but the tree was blackened and cracked open down the middle. Inside the split trunk, Evelyn saw something she could never explain. An old locket, half melted, trapped within the heartwood. Inside it was a tiny portrait of a man and woman. The initials HM were scratched faintly on the back. Evelyn took it inside, cleaned it carefully, and set it by the window. That night she dreamed of a woman weeping in the orchard, her hands stained with soil, her voice whispering one word over and over: "Forgive." When she awoke, the locket was gone. Word of the widow reviving the cursed orchard spread through Clay Hollow. Some folks were curious, others fearful. One morning a stranger arrived, a man in a black coat, tall and thin, introducing himself as Dr. Harlan Moore, historian from the county seat. He claimed he'd been studying the Morton family, the orchard's original owners. They vanished during a feud, he said, after a dispute over land and inheritance. Some say foul play was involved. Evelyn invited him for tea, and he noticed the orchard through the window. "Strange," he murmured. "The soil here should be dead, but something's waking it up." Caleb didn't trust him. "He gives me the chills," he whispered. Still, Evelyn felt drawn to the man's quiet sadness. There was something in his eyes, a memory, maybe, or regret. And later that evening, she caught him standing by the fence, staring at the trees as though remembering them from another life. Dr. Moore began visiting often, helping with repairs, bringing old maps and records. Evelyn learned he was once a school teacher, widowed like her. He never spoke of his past beyond that. One evening, as they worked by lantern light, Caleb pointed to something strange, a faint glow deeper in the orchard. "You see that?" he said. They followed it, pushing through tangled branches until they reached the same nameless grave. The glow pulsed gently, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Dr. Moore knelt, trembling. "This is where they found her," he whispered. "Who?" Evelyn asked. "My mother," he said quietly. "Hester Morton. I was a boy when it happened." Evelyn froze. "Then you—" "Yes. Harlan Morton Moore. I changed my name to forget." The wind stirred. The faint glow brightened, then faded. Evelyn realized with a chill that the orchard spirit wasn't cursing anyone. It was waiting for this very moment, for the sun to come home. The next day, while sweeping the farmhouse, Evelyn found a loose plank under the hearth. Beneath it lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, a letter, and a small key. The letter was dated September 3, 1874, signed by Hester Morton. "My husband's greed has cursed this land," it read. "He buried what he stole beneath the orchard and swore no fruit would ripen until his sin was forgotten. If anyone finds this, unlock the past and set it free." Evelyn showed it to Harlan. His hands shook as he read. "He murdered for gold," he said softly. "I remember the shouting that night, and then nothing." The key gleamed in the sunlight, small and rusted. Caleb pointed toward the oldest tree, the one that had been struck by lightning. "Maybe that's where it's buried," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Then tonight we find it." and maybe this orchard can finally rest. Under the pale light of the waning moon, they dug at the base of the blackened tree. The soil was cold and damp, smelling of rot and rain. After an hour, the shovel struck wood. They pried open a small chest, the key fitting perfectly into the rusted lock. Inside were gold coins, tarnished jewelry, and a single letter written in trembling ink. It read, "Forgive me, my love. I took what was not mine, and now the orchard will bear no fruit. Bury me beneath it, so perhaps the earth may take back what I stole. Henry Morton." Harlan bowed his head, tears streaking his dirt-stained face. Evelyn placed her hand on his shoulder. "Maybe forgiveness isn't in the fruit," she whispered. "Maybe it's in the act of trying." At that moment, the wind rose. Branches trembled. A soft rain began to fall, and in the dim lantern light they saw it. A single apple, full and red, ripening before their eyes. When morning came, the orchard looked different. The mist had lifted, and the air carried a scent of rain and earth, clean, alive. Evelyn, Caleb, and Harlan stood beneath the blackened tree, staring at that single apple. It hung heavy and bright, its skin smooth as polished ruby. Caleb reached up carefully, twisting it free. "It's warm," he whispered. Harlan turned the fruit in his hand, his voice breaking. "All my life, I thought this land hated me. Maybe it was just waiting for the truth." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Sometimes the soil doesn't need new roots. It just needs peace." They shared the apple, cutting it into 3 small pieces. It was sweet, sweeter than anything Evelyn had tasted in years. For the first time, she felt hope bloom inside her like spring after a long winter. But as the last bite disappeared, a strange wind swept through the orchard, carrying with it a faint, echoing sigh, half sorrow, half release. That night, Evelyn awoke to the sound of whispering, not from outside, but from within the walls of her old farmhouse. The voices were soft, urgent, overlapping like echoes in a dream. She rose, lit her lantern, and followed them to the window facing the orchard. There, between the trees, she saw faint silver lights floating like fireflies. Figures seemed to move within the glow, their faces blurred but gentle. One of them, a woman in a long dress, lifted her hand as though beckoning Evelyn closer. Evelyn whispered, "Hester?" A voice, calm and sorrowful, answered in the wind. "Thank you for freeing what was bound, but one root still holds the curse." The lantern flame flickered violently, then went out. The house plunged into darkness. Evelyn stood frozen as the wind carried the scent of blossoms, apple blossoms, blooming in the dead of autumn. At dawn, Evelyn gathered Harlan and Caleb. "The spirit said there's one root still bound," she told them. They returned to the orchard, this time to the farthest corner, where the trees grew twisted and thin. Harlan knelt, brushing away leaves. His hand struck something cold and metallic. It was another small box, buried shallowly beneath the roots. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay a rusted wedding band and a lock of hair. Harlan stared at it in silence. "My father's ring," he whispered. "He wasn't buried under the trees. He was hidden here." Tears welled in his eyes, not of grief, but of understanding. He took lives for gold, but maybe he hid his own shame here. Evelyn placed the relics beside the nameless grave. "Then, let's finish what he couldn't," she said softly. "Let's give them rest." As they bowed their heads in prayer, the air grew still again, so still that even the leaves seemed to hold their breath. That evening, church bells rang faintly from town, a sound that hadn't been heard in Clay Hollow since the old chapel collapsed years ago. Caleb ran outside, calling, "Miss Evelyn, it's coming from the orchard." Indeed, a low musical ringing echoed among the trees, though there was no bell in sight. It came from nowhere, and everywhere at once. Harland whispered, "It's her, my mother. She's saying goodbye." The sound faded into a single chime, clear and pure, and then, as if carried by the note itself, a warm wind rushed through the orchard, scattering petals across their feet. Every branch trembled with color. Dozens of apples glowed faintly red in the moonlight, ripening all at once. Evelyn covered her mouth in awe. "It's over," she breathed. "The orchard's alive again." But she didn't yet know. Its gift came with a price. The next morning, people from Clay Hollow came walking up the dirt road, drawn by rumors of the miracle orchard. They saw the fruit, the shining trees, and the widow who had made the barren land bloom again. Children laughed and picked apples. The air was filled with joy. Evelyn shared what she could, giving away baskets to anyone who asked. For the first time in decades, the orchard fed the town. But as evening fell, she noticed something strange. The apples began to fade in color, turning pale again, as though drained of life. Harland looked troubled. "It's the curse," he said. "It's bound to this place, not the fruit. Every gift it gives, it takes back." Evelyn shook her head. "Then we'll keep giving too." She planted wildflowers around every grave, whispering prayers with each seed. "Let kindness be stronger than curses," she said. The earth seemed to hum beneath her hands. As winter neared, the orchard began to change again. Frost rimmed the branches, but the trees stood proud, still heavy with some fruit. Caleb fell ill with a fever one night, coughing and shivering. Evelyn sat by his bedside, holding his hand. "You'll be all right, my dear," she whispered, though worry filled her eyes. Harlan brought her herbs and blankets, but Caleb only worsened. On the third night, Evelyn prayed aloud beneath the blackened tree. "If the orchard owes a debt," she said, voice breaking, "let it take it from me, not from him." A gust of wind swirled through the branches, scattering red leaves like embers. When Evelyn returned to the house, Caleb was sleeping peacefully, his fever gone. But Harlan found her collapsed near the doorway, pale and trembling, her pulse faint. She whispered, "It's all right. The land just took what it was owed." Evelyn never fully recovered. She grew weaker as snow fell over the hills, but her spirit remained strong. Caleb tended to her daily, bringing her tea, reading to her from the Bible, and keeping the fire bright. The orchard, though bare in winter, seemed to stand guard over the farmhouse, its branches like arms protecting her. One evening, Harlan brought her a small basket. Inside were 3 apples, still fresh, still red, even in the cold. Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's forgiven," she whispered. "The orchard forgave us all." Harlan took her hand. "You gave this land back its soul," he said. That night, as the wind howled through the foothills, the candle in Evelyn's window burned steady and bright. It didn't flicker once until dawn. By springtime, the snow melted, revealing green shoots along the orchard floor. New buds formed, and the trees shimmered with blossoms so white they looked like clouds resting on the branches. Caleb and Harlan worked together to care for the land, planting flowers where Evelyn used to kneel. "She said kindness wakes the earth," Caleb told him, "so we'll keep it awake." When the first harvest came, the fruit grew larger and sweeter than anyone remembered. People from neighboring towns came to see the widow's orchard, as they now called it. Each apple sold helped rebuild Clay Hollow's church, schoolhouse, and homes. But in the heart of the orchard, beneath the oldest tree, one apple always hung untouched, never falling, never rotting. The people said it was Evelyn's spirit, watching over them still. Years passed. Caleb grew into a strong young man and took care of the orchard as Evelyn once had. Harlan wrote a book about the land and the people who redeemed it, not with gold, but with grace. One morning, while pruning a branch, Caleb found a piece of folded parchment caught in the bark. It was weathered, but the writing was clear. To those who tend this land with love, remember, the fruit is not the blessing. The kindness is. Evelyn Hargrove, 1907. Caleb smiled through tears. He took the note to town and hung it in the rebuilt chapel, beside a single crimson apple placed at the altar each year in her memory. The orchard had become more than a farm. It was a promise kept, a living story of forgiveness. Decades later, travelers passing through the Kentucky foothills still speak of the orchard that should not have bloomed. On misty mornings, they say you can hear the faint sound of a woman humming among the trees, a lullaby carried on the wind. And if you listen closely, the leaves seem to whisper her name, Evelyn. No fruit has ever rotted there since. Each harvest brings sweetness beyond measure, shared freely with all who visit. Children grow up learning her story, the widow who turned a haunted orchard into a field of grace. And when the last apple of autumn ripens, the townsfolk gather to say the same words Evelyn once spoke. May kindness wake the earth again. As the sun sets over Clay Hollow, the orchard glows like gold, and somewhere, unseen, a lantern's light flickers once more in the farmhouse window. The curse was never broken by power. It was healed by love.